The cabin of Flight 287 buzzed with chatter as sunlight poured through the windows, glinting off coffee cups and seatbelt buckles. Passengers were settling in for what should have been a calm, routine trip from Los Angeles to Chicago, but peace was never in Karen's vocabulary. Her sharp voice sliced through the hum of conversation, demanding attention from everyone within 5 rows. The problem? A gentle, silver-haired woman had accidentally brushed her arm while adjusting her seatbelt. What followed shocked the entire plane. Karen shot up from her seat, glaring daggers. "Watch where you're touching, old lady," she screamed, causing passengers to turn and stare. The elderly woman, wearing a calm smile, softly apologized, but that only fueled Karen's fury. Without warning, Karen slapped her across the face. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Flight attendants rushed over, horrified. Phones were out instantly. The world was about to witness one of the most disgraceful public meltdowns in airline history. But what no one knew, not even the captain up front, was that the woman Karen just attacked wasn't a regular passenger. She was Evelyn Moore, the CEO of the very airline Karen was flying with. The flight turned into chaos as crew members struggled to contain the furious Karen, who was shouting about special treatment and terrible service. But as the truth began to unfold midair, Karen's power trip spiraled into a humiliating downfall that would follow her long after the landing gear touched the ground. By the time the plane descended into the sunny Chicago skyline, everyone on board knew one thing. Karma had finally booked a first-class ticket, and Karen was sitting in the middle of it. The morning sun stretched across Los Angeles like liquid gold, bathing the airport in a warm, steady glow. The day felt almost too perfect, the kind of day that promised smooth flights and smiling passengers. At Gate 42, the boarding call for Flight 287 to Chicago echoed through the terminal, and travelers began to gather their belongings. The steady shuffle of luggage wheels rolling over polished floors. Evelyn Moore sat quietly near the window, her gaze fixed on the planes gliding across the tarmac. At first glance, no one would guess who she was. Dressed in a simple beige cardigan, tan slacks, and sneakers, she looked like any other middle-aged traveler heading home. But behind those soft gray eyes was a woman of immense power, the CEO of Skylift Airlines, the very company operating the flight. She had built her success over decades, rising from a flight attendant to the top office in the corporate tower. And though she now oversaw thousands of employees, she believed in staying grounded, literally. Every few months, Evelyn boarded one of her own flights unannounced, to experience the service firsthand. She wanted to see what her passengers saw, feel what they felt, and ensure that Skylift's reputation as one of the most passenger-friendly airlines stayed true. She carried no assistant, no entourage, only a leather purse, her phone, and a small paperback novel. As she stood in line to board, a few rows behind her came a woman whose presence seemed to suck the air out of the line. Karen Miles, mid-40s, designer sunglasses, glossy blonde hair, and an expression that said the world owed her something. She scrolled through her phone, sighing loudly every few seconds as if to remind everyone that she was inconvenienced by their very existence. When the gate agent smiled and greeted her with a good morning, Karen didn't reply. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "Let's make this quick. I have a tight schedule." The gate agent kept her composure. "Of course, ma'am. Boarding pass, please." Karen handed it over with an exaggerated flick of her wrist. "I hope this flight isn't full. I need space. I don't want to be squished next to someone who smells like airplane food." Evelyn overheard the remark as she stepped onto the jet bridge but didn't react. She'd seen people like Karen before, loud on the outside, fragile on the inside. Still, she couldn't help but feel a quiet unease. Some passengers just brought turbulence with them. Inside the plane, the cabin glowed with soft daylight pouring through oval windows. The hum of conversation and the occasional laugh filled the air as passengers settled into their seats. The flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisle, offering assistance and smiles that had been practiced 1,000 times. Evelyn took her seat by the window in row 14. A young couple sat in front of her, whispering excitedly about their honeymoon plans. Across the aisle, a mother soothed her restless toddler. The atmosphere was light. Human. Then came Karen. She arrived with a rustle of designer fabric and irritation already etched into her features. "Excuse me," she snapped at the flight attendant standing near her seat. "I asked for extra legroom. This doesn't look like extra legroom." The attendant checked the ticket, maintaining her professionalism. "This is the premium economy section, ma'am. It does have 2 inches of added legroom compared to 2 inches. Karen interrupted with a scoff. "Do I look like someone who measures comfort in inches?" The attendant tried to offer a polite smile. "If you'd like, I can check if there's a business class seat available." "Forget it," Karen barked, throwing her tote bag into the overhead bin with a thud. "I'll make do. I shouldn't have to pay more for comfort anyway." As she squeezed into the middle seat beside Evelyn, the entire row seemed to exhale in discomfort. Karen huffed, adjusted her seatbelt with unnecessary aggression, and pulled out a large iced coffee from her purse despite the airline's no outside beverages. "Rule." Evelyn offered a polite nod and a small smile. "Good morning." Karen barely glanced at her. "Yeah, whatever." The plane continued boarding, and soon the cabin was full. A faint announcement buzzed overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Skylift Flight 287 with service to Chicago. The pilot's cheerful tone set a pleasant mood, and as the plane began to taxi, most passengers leaned back, ready for takeoff, but not Karen. From the moment the seatbelt sign lit up, she began complaining. "This air vent is freezing. Why is it blowing so hard? Can't you fix it?" She snapped at the nearest flight attendant. "And my seatbelt is too tight. Who designs these things?" Evelyn adjusted her own belt quietly, hoping to diffuse the tension with calm energy. But Karen wasn't done. When the attendant moved to another row, Karen muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Unbelievable. These people can't even manage basic comfort. I swear, airlines have gone downhill." Evelyn turned slightly toward her and said, in her soft, steady voice, "I've always found Skylift to be one of the better ones, actually." Karen laughed bitterly. "You must not travel much. This airline's a joke. The service, the seats, the snacks, all garbage." Evelyn's lips curved into a patient smile. "Maybe you've just had bad luck. Sometimes a little kindness makes the flight smoother." Karen frowned, eyeing her up and down. "Are you one of those motivational types? Save it. Some of us have real problems." Evelyn didn't reply. She simply opened her novel, the corners of her mouth still calm, and began to read. An hour later, the plane was cruising above white cotton clouds, sunlight gleaming off the wings. Flight attendants rolled their carts down the aisles, offering drinks and light snacks. Karen immediately pressed the call button. "Yes, ma'am." The attendant asked. Karen pointed at the snack box. "That's it. This is what you call food. You people charge hundreds for a ticket and give us peanuts and pretzels." The attendant kept her composure. "We also have sandwiches available for purchase, ma'am." Karen threw up her hands. "Purchased? You're nickel-and-diming everyone. Ridiculous." The woman across the aisle, an elderly traveler with a kind smile, leaned over and said, "It's not so bad, dear. I think the pretzels are quite good." Karen shot her a glare. "Did I ask for your opinion?" The elderly woman blinked in surprise. Evelyn's eyes lifted from her book, watching silently. The tension thickened, but before Evelyn could intervene, Karen leaned back with an exaggerated sigh and muttered, "Old people shouldn't fly if they can't mind their own business." Evelyn closed her book. "That wasn't very kind," she said softly. Karen turned sharply. "And who are you? The kindness police?" "No," Evelyn replied evenly. "Just someone who believes respect shouldn't require effort." Karen rolled her eyes and looked away, but Evelyn's words lingered in the air, quiet yet unshakable, like a warning before a storm. Outside, the world below gleamed under the midday sun. Cities, rivers, and highways threading through the landscape. Inside, however, Flight 287 was about to hit a different kind of turbulence. Neither Karen nor Evelyn could have guessed how quickly their fates would collide, or that this ordinary flight, under a flawless blue sky, was about to become a headline the world wouldn't forget. The calm before the chaos was almost over. The cabin was alive with mid-flight calm. The rhythmic hum of the engines blended with the faint chatter of passengers and the occasional clink of coffee cups. Sunlight filtered through the oval windows, casting warm patterns over tray tables and folded newspapers. It was the kind of tranquil atmosphere that lulled most travelers into a sense of comfort, except one, Karen Miles. Sitting in row 14 wasn't enjoying a moment of it. She shifted restlessly in her seat, sighing dramatically every few minutes, as if the entire plane should be aware of her discomfort. Her glossy sunglasses were perched atop her head, and her iced coffee cup, now mostly melted, was crammed into the seat pocket in front of her, dripping condensation onto the in-flight magazine. Evelyn Moore, still calm beside her, had returned to reading her novel. She had barely spoken since their earlier exchange, content to let the trip pass in silence. But Karen, clearly agitated, couldn't sit quietly. Every small inconvenience seemed to ignite her temper: the reclining seat in front of her, the crying toddler across the aisle, the Wi-Fi connection flickering in and out. "This is ridiculous," Karen muttered under her breath. "You'd think a major airline could afford working internet." Evelyn looked up briefly from her book. "Sometimes the signal drops over certain areas," she offered politely. Karen let out a scoff. "Oh, right. You'd know all about that, wouldn't you? The expert in airline excuses." Evelyn smiled gently. "No excuses, just experience." That answer only irritated Karen more. She turned toward Evelyn, narrowing her eyes. "You're one of those people, aren't you? The kind that thinks they're calm and wise, but really just loves to sound superior." Evelyn placed her bookmark between the pages and closed her novel. Her voice remained soft. "I'm just trying to make conversation, dear," Karen snapped. "Don't dear me. I didn't ask for your company." A few passengers nearby began to glance over. The tension in row 14 was impossible to ignore. Evelyn, sensing the growing discomfort around them, decided it was best to remain silent. She folded her hands in her lap and looked out the window, watching the endless stretch of blue sky. But Karen's irritation didn't fade. It grew. When the flight attendants came through with a second drink service, Evelyn reached forward to adjust the shared armrest slightly to make room for her cup. Her hand brushed Karen's elbow, a completely harmless accidental touch. That was the spark. Karen recoiled as if burned. "Excuse me, did you just hit me?" Evelyn blinked, startled. "Oh no, not at all. I just don't touch me." Karen's voice rose, sharp and cutting. Heads began to turn. "I didn't mean to," Evelyn started, but Karen cut her off again, louder this time. "You people have no manners. Keep your hands to yourself." The mother across the aisle turned in surprise, clutching her toddler closer. A businessman a few rows up lowered his headphones. Whispers spread like ripples. Evelyn tried to calm her. "It was an accident, dear. I'm sorry if I..." And then it happened. Before anyone could react, Karen raised her hand and slapped Evelyn across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin, a sharp, shocking smack that silenced everything for a heartbeat. The entire plane seemed to freeze. Evelyn's head turned slightly from the force, her glasses slipping down her nose. The left side of her face reddened instantly. She didn't cry out, didn't yell. She simply took a slow, stunned breath. Gasps erupted around them. The mother across the aisle exclaimed, "Oh my God." Someone in the back muttered, "Did she just hit that lady?" And a teenager, 3 rows up, already had his phone out, recording. A flight attendant rushed forward, eyes wide. Mum. What just happened?" Karen stood up, shaking with indignation. "What happened?" "I was assaulted. She hit me first." Evelyn, still seated, looked up calmly. Her voice was steady, almost too calm for the moment. "I didn't hit her. I accidentally brushed her arm while adjusting the armrest." The attendant looked between them, clearly horrified. "Ma'am, we cannot tolerate any physical contact like that on a flight." Karen jabbed a finger toward Evelyn. "Then kick her off when we land. People like her shouldn't be allowed to fly. She's dangerous." Passengers around them erupted in disbelief. "She didn't do anything," someone shouted. "You slapped her." Karen turned on the crowd, shouting, "Mind your own business. You don't know what she did." The attendant pressed the call button near the ceiling. "Captain, we have a situation in row 14, she said into her headset. Evelyn remained silent, still staring down at her folded hands. The sting on her cheek was sharp, but her composure didn't waver. Years of corporate pressure, media interviews, and difficult boardroom battles had trained her for moments like this, though none quite so personal. Karen, meanwhile, paced in the aisle like a trapped animal, muttering angrily, "Unbelievable. I pay good money for this airline and get assaulted by some random old woman." Another attendant approached from the front, firm but professional. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat and calm down." Karen glared at her. "Calm down. She hit me." Evelyn finally looked up, her gray eyes meeting Karen's furious glare. "Please," she said softly, "sit down before you make things worse." Karen froze. The tone, quiet, steady, commanding, struck something in her. It wasn't fear exactly, but a recognition of authority she couldn't quite place. Still, she refused to back down. "Worse. You think you can threaten me? Who even are you?" Evelyn didn't answer. Passengers were murmuring now. Phones were recording from multiple angles. The attendants exchanged worried glances. The captain's voice came over the intercom moments later. Calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are aware of a disturbance in the cabin. Please remain seated and calm while the situation is handled." The second attendant gestured toward the back of the plane. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Karen huffed, snatched up her tote bag, and stormed toward the rear galley. As she passed, she glared down at Evelyn and muttered, "You'll regret this." Evelyn said nothing. When Karen was gone, the passengers exhaled collectively, like the cabin had been holding its breath. The attendants apologized quietly to Evelyn, offering her a cool cloth and a cup of water. She accepted with grace. "I'm so sorry this happened." The younger attendant whispered. "It's all right," Evelyn replied gently. "You handled it well." She dabbed the red mark on her cheek and turned to the window. Below, the clouds drifted by peacefully, undisturbed by the chaos inside the metal tube cutting through the sky. She could already sense that this incident wasn't over, not by a long shot. In the back, Karen continued her tirade, loudly proclaiming that she would sue the airline, that someone would lose their job over this. The attendants tried to calm her, but nothing seemed to penetrate her outrage. Evelyn took a slow sip of water. Her reflection in the window looked tired but calm. She knew the crew would soon file a report. There would be consequences for both of them, perhaps. But deep inside, Evelyn also knew something Karen didn't. The truth always had a way of surfacing, and when it did, the skies above weren't the only thing that would come crashing down. The cabin of Flight 287 had shifted from chaos to a strange, fragile silence. The air still felt heavy, not from turbulence, but from shock. Most passengers sat stiff in their seats, eyes occasionally darting toward the back of the plane, where Karen Miles was now seated under the watchful gaze of 2 flight attendants. Her furious muttering had dwindled into sharp whispers, like a storm losing its strength but still spitting thunder. Evelyn Moore remained in row 14, the red mark on her cheek fading to a soft pink. She had declined medical attention, insisting she was fine. Her calmness baffled the passengers nearby. Anyone else might have been trembling with anger or shame after such a public humiliation, but Evelyn just sat quietly, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the clouds drifting outside the window. The lead flight attendant, A tall woman named Marissa approached with a clipboard. Her voice was gentle but professional. "Ms. Moore, I need to take your statement about what happened earlier. The captain has informed ground security and will need to file an incident report before landing." Evelyn nodded. "Of course, please, sit." Marissa perched on the edge of the aisle seat, pen ready. "Can you describe what led up to the altercation?" Evelyn recounted the events in her usual steady tone, how she had accidentally brushed Karen's arm while lowering the armrest, how the woman erupted, and finally how she was struck. Her account was simple, factual, stripped of emotion. When she finished, Marissa looked up, visibly impressed by the older woman's restraint. "Thank you," the attendant said softly. "You've handled this better than anyone I've ever seen." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Experience, my dear. When you've been in business long enough, you learn not to let chaos dictate your response." Marissa laughed quietly. "Well, I wish every passenger was like you. We'll make sure you're safe for the rest of the flight. Karen won't come near you again." Evelyn nodded her thanks, but her mind was already elsewhere. She could feel the curiosity radiating from the rows around her, people wondering who she really was, why she carried herself with such composure. She looked like someone used to being in control, someone who'd weathered storms far greater than a slap on an airplane. Meanwhile, in the rear galley, Karen was fuming. She had been placed in a single seat near the lavatory, humiliatingly close to the flight attendant's workspace. Every time she tried to stand, one of them gently but firmly asked her to sit down, her face flushed with rage. "This is ridiculous." She snapped at the younger attendant, a nervous man named Joel. "That woman assaulted me, and you're treating me like a criminal." Joel kept his voice calm. "Ma'am, the other passengers' videos show otherwise. Please, stay seated until we land." Karen's eyes widened. "Videos? Are you saying people were filming me?" Joel nodded, not meeting her gaze. "Yes, ma'am. Quite a few." Karen slumped back, her hands trembling. For the first time since boarding, the confidence drained from her voice. "They filmed me," she whispered. Oh God, the realization hit her like turbulence. She imagined herself splashed across the internet, hashtags mocking her, strangers calling her Airplane Karen. She'd seen those viral clips before, people behaving badly becoming instant targets of public ridicule. She'd laughed at them once. Now she could feel the cold dread of becoming one. In row 14, Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief rest. She wasn't angry, just sad. Sad that people like Karen existed in a world where kindness should have been easier than cruelty. But she also knew this was an opportunity. Not for revenge, but for lesson. Half an hour later, Marissa returned, this time with an apologetic smile. "Ms. Moore, the captain would like a word with you privately, if you don't mind. You can come up to the front galley." Evelyn stood gracefully. Of course, as she walked through the aisle, passengers watched her with quiet admiration. They didn't know who she was, but they sensed she wasn't ordinary. There was a dignity about her, the kind that didn't need to demand respect, it simply drew it naturally at the front of the plane. The captain stood waiting near the cockpit door. He was a kind-faced man in his 50s with silver at his temples. "Miss Moore," he said, shaking her hand. "I just wanted to personally apologize for what happened. I've been informed about everything." Evelyn smiled warmly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Captain. Your crew has handled it well." He hesitated. "Still, we're embarrassed. We try to make every flight peaceful. And this incident, well, it's unacceptable." Evelyn nodded. "It is, but you can only control so much. Sometimes people bring their own turbulence on board." The captain chuckled. "That's true. But we'll make sure she's met by security when we land, and I'll personally ensure the report goes to corporate." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, amused. "Corporate, you say? Well, I suppose they'll be quite interested in hearing about this one." He frowned slightly, not understanding the hint. "Absolutely, ma'am. I'll make sure the CEO sees it." Evelyn's smile widened just a bit. "I'm sure she will." She thanked the captain and returned to her seat, feeling a strange calm. Justice was already in motion, but she wasn't thinking about punishment. She was thinking about perspective. How often did people like Karen move through the world, convinced they were victims when they were, in truth, the storm itself? When the plane began its descent toward Chicago, the golden afternoon sunlight filled the cabin again. The captain's voice came over the speaker, smooth and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." Karen sat rigid in her back seat, chewing her lip. She could feel eyes burning holes in her back. Every whisper felt like it was about her, maybe because it was. She tried to convince herself it would blow over, that she could explain, that the videos wouldn't spread far. But deep down, she knew the truth. The internet never forgot. Evelyn, on the other hand, looked utterly peaceful. Her hands rested on her lap, her book closed. As the wheels touched down and the plane rolled across the sunlit tarmac, she felt an immense sense of relief, not for herself, but for what would come next. Sometimes the universe didn't need intervention. Karma worked right on schedule. As the passengers stood to disembark, a uniformed security officer entered the cabin, waiting by the door. Karen's face went pale. The officer's calm voice carried clearly through the rows. "Ms. Karen Miles, please stay seated. We need to speak with you regarding an onboard incident." A ripple of murmurs spread again. Karen's hands trembled. This is insane. You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong. Evelyn, walking past, paused, just briefly. She looked at Karen not with anger but with quiet pity. Some lessons, she said gently, I'll learn the hard way. Karen's jaw dropped, recognition flashing across her face. Wait, who are you? Evelyn smiled softly. Just someone who believes people can always choose to be better. Then she walked off the plane, the afternoon sunlight catching her silver hair like a halo. Behind her, Karen's protests grew fainter, swallowed by the hum of the terminal and by the truth that at 30,000 feet, her own arrogance had finally brought her down to earth. The automatic doors at gate 32 slid open, and the crisp scent of brewed coffee and jet fuel mingled in the terminal air. Passengers from Flight 287 spilled into the bustling concourse, their voices weaving through the hum of airport chatter. Some were relieved, others exhausted, but nearly everyone shared a single topic of conversation: the woman in row 26 who lost control midair. Evelyn Moore walked slowly among them, her posture straight, her face serene. Her elegant gray coat and calm demeanor made her stand out in the sea of restless travelers. She could hear whispers trail behind her, bits of gossip from those who had seen the incident unfold. Did you see her slap that lady? I heard she's going viral already. Unbelievable. People like that shouldn't be allowed to fly. Evelyn didn't respond. She had no interest in the spectacle or the attention. She only wanted to reach the arrivals lounge, call her driver, and leave this unpleasant chapter behind. Yet, she had a feeling the story was far from over. Back on the jet bridge, Karen Miles sat in a row of molded plastic chairs, flanked by two uniformed airport security officers. Her eyes were red, her hands clutching her designer handbag as if it were a life raft. The swagger she'd displayed on the plane had evaporated. Her once perfect hair was disheveled, and her lipstick smudged from nervous biting. I didn't mean to hit her, she insisted to the officer on her right, her voice trembling. She provoked me. She invaded my space. I just reacted. The officer, a middle-aged man with a patient face, sighed. Ma'am, several passengers filmed the incident from start to finish. The footage is clear. Karen's jaw tightened. Footage? You mean people were recording me? Without my consent? The officer exchanged a glance with his colleague. You were in a public setting, ma'am. And yes, it's already circulating online. Karen's heart dropped into her stomach. She fumbled for her phone, unlocking it with shaking fingers. The moment her home screen appeared, a flood of notifications filled the screen: messages, missed calls, and dozens of social media tags. She tapped one. A video was already trending on X, formerly Twitter. The caption read, Karen loses it mid-flight, strikes older woman over armrest dispute. Hashtag Flight 287, hashtag Airplane Karen. The clip had over 600,000 views. Her face, her voice, her fury, all immortalized in pixels for the world to dissect. The comments were brutal. How can people still act like this in 2025? She hit an elderly woman. Jail time. Wait till her employer sees this. Karen's chest tightened. She tried to breathe, but her lungs refused to cooperate. Meanwhile, Evelyn made her way toward baggage claim, her phone vibrating in her purse. She answered it quietly. Hello, Margaret, she said warmly. On the other end, her assistant's voice sounded rushed. Mrs. Moore, thank heavens you're safe. I just saw the video. You're all over the internet. Evelyn smiled faintly. So I've been told. People are calling you the calm lady of Flight 287. Everyone's praising how composed you were. Do you want me to prepare a statement? Evelyn paused near a large window overlooking the runway. Not yet. Let it breathe. The truth speaks for itself. There was a soft rustle of papers on the other end. Understood, ma'am. Also, the CEO from Global Air just reached out. He's requesting a personal call with you, something about corporate response. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the horizon. Tell him I'll call after I get home. She hung up, a small smile forming on her lips. The irony wasn't lost on her that the airline now wanted to consult her on how to handle the scandal. They didn't yet realize who she truly was. Because Evelyn Moore wasn't just a passenger, she was a retired executive, the former vice president of public relations for the same airline, a woman who had spent decades teaching others how to handle crisis with grace. She had written policies about passenger behavior, overseen PR disasters, and trained crews on conflict resolution. She had simply chosen to fly quietly that day, without the weight of a title. Back at gate 32, Karen's interrogation had ended. The officers escorted her to a quieter room near the terminal's security office, where a representative from the airline waited. The woman introduced herself as Leah Foster, corporate customer relations. Her tone was professional, but her expression carried restrained disappointment. Ms. Miles, Leah began, we've reviewed the footage and gathered statements from multiple passengers. What you did constitutes physical assault. As per airline policy, you're now on the no-fly list pending investigation. Karen blinked, stunned. No-fly list? You can't be serious. I have business meetings, international travel. I'm afraid that's out of our hands, Leah said calmly. Airport authorities may also press charges. Karen's voice rose. This is outrageous. I was defending myself from that woman. She's not innocent. Leah's brow furrowed. You mean Ms. Evelyn Moore? Karen froze. You know her name? Leah nodded slowly. Everyone does. She used to be one of our top executives. The blood drained from Karen's face. Leah continued, her voice lowering. She built much of the public ethics and behavior code you just violated. Karen slumped back in her chair, her pulse pounding in her ears. She remembered Evelyn's calm, unshakable expression, the quiet authority in her voice. No wonder she'd seemed unbothered. She'd seen people like Karen 1,000 times before. Please, Karen whispered. Is there anything I can do to fix this? Leah sighed. Cooperate fully, and maybe learn from it. For the next few hours, Evelyn's video spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, dubbing it Grace versus Rage, the Flight 287 confrontation. Analysts praised Evelyn's composure. Body language experts dissected her calmness, and psychologists discussed the rising trend of air rage. By evening, Evelyn sat in her quiet home office overlooking Lake Michigan. Her phone rang again. This time, the CEO himself. Evelyn, his voice boomed through the line. I saw what happened. You handled it like a masterclass in professionalism. The internet's calling you a hero. She chuckled softly. I didn't do anything heroic, Thomas. I just didn't lose control. That's exactly what people need to see, he said. Would you consider coming back temporarily? As a consultant, help us craft a response campaign, maybe something on civility, empathy, passenger behavior. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. I'll think about it, but if I do, it has to mean something. No gimmicks, no PR spin, just truth. That's what you're best at, he replied warmly. After the call ended, Evelyn set her phone down and stared out at the water. The city lights shimmered like stars reflected on glass. She felt no triumph, no vindication, only clarity. Sometimes, life had a way of reminding people of their own teachings. The universe had placed her there, not by accident, but to show perhaps to both Karen and herself that composure was the rarest form of strength. Across the city, Karen sat in her apartment surrounded by silence, the glow of her phone screen illuminating her tear-streaked face. Every attempt to defend herself online only worsened the backlash. She read comment after comment, realizing how quickly pride could turn into isolation. And somewhere deep within, for the first time in years, she whispered words she hadn't spoken in a long while. I'm sorry, it wasn't enough to erase what happened, but it was a start, the first step toward humility. Back at Lake Michigan, Evelyn sipped her tea and smiled faintly at the breaking news headline flashing on her screen. Former airline executive inspires global conversation on kindness after viral in-flight incident. And as the night deepened, she whispered softly to herself, not as a victim, but as a teacher reborn. Some storms are sent to remind us how strong the calm can be. The following morning dawned with golden lights spilling across Chicago's skyline. The city was alive, honking cars, bustling sidewalks, and the faint hum of airplanes carving trails through the blue sky. For most people it was an ordinary day, but for two women, Evelyn Moore and Karen Miles, this morning marked a new chapter, one of reckoning, redemption, and reflection. Evelyn sat in her office overlooking the lake, the same office she hadn't entered in nearly a year. A soft breeze drifted through the slightly opened window, carrying with it the faint scent of coffee from a nearby cafe. The walls were lined with framed photographs, moments from decades of work in aviation, award ceremonies, charity events, and the smiling faces of crew members she had once mentored. She gazed at them fondly, remembering each story behind those still images. On her desk, the morning newspaper lay open. The headline read, Airline CEO assault victim becomes symbol of dignity, inspires new code of conduct initiative. Evelyn read the article quietly, her fingers tracing the printed words. The airline's PR department, under the guidance of her former colleagues, had launched a new campaign inspired by her composure during the flight. They had even asked her to record a short message for passengers worldwide, a message about empathy, patience, and respect. She had agreed, not for attention, but because she believed deeply that kindness should never go out of style. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment on the city's west side, Karen Miles sat alone at her dining table, staring blankly at her laptop. The glow of the screen reflected in her tired eyes. Every few minutes a new message or comment appeared, some mocking, some furious, but a few surprisingly kind. One message stood out. You made a huge mistake, but own it. Learn from it. Everyone deserves a second chance. Karen read it over and over, the words echoing in her mind. She hadn't slept much in days. The noise of social media, the news, and her own regret had been relentless. The company she worked for had suspended her indefinitely. Friends stopped answering her calls, and even her family told her to lay low for a while. She exhaled shakily, then opened a new email. The subject line was simple, apology. She began to type, to Mrs. Evelyn Moore, I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it. Not after what I did. I lost control and acted with arrogance and anger toward someone who showed me nothing but grace. I was wrong, deeply wrong. The entire world saw me at my worst, and I can only hope to become better than that person. I want you to know I'm truly sorry. Karen Miles. Karen hesitated before pressing send. her finger hovering over the trackpad. For a brief moment, fear held her back, fear of rejection, of being ignored, of facing the very person who had seen her lowest moment. But then she thought of the calm in Evelyn's eyes during that chaotic flight, the quiet strength that made her feel small, not through humiliation, but truth. She pressed send. Later that afternoon, Evelyn's inbox pinged. She read Karen's message slowly, her expression unreadable. The words carried a sincerity that she hadn't expected. She sat back in her chair, letting the weight of the letter settle. Then, she began typing a reply. Dear Ms. Miles, I appreciate your courage to write this message. Taking responsibility is the hardest and most important step toward growth. I don't hold anger toward you. I've seen countless situations like ours during my years in aviation, people losing patience, losing themselves for a moment. What defines us isn't our mistakes, but what we do after them. I hope you use this experience to become a voice for better behavior, not a victim of your own past. With sincerity, Evelyn Moore. When Karen opened that response later in the evening, tears streamed down her face. For the first time since the incident, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: relief, not because she had been forgiven, but because someone had seen beyond her mistake. Days passed. The viral frenzy slowly faded as news stories took over the internet's attention span. Yet the message of that day of grace, patience, and accountability lingered. The airline's new Fly with Respect campaign was launched, featuring Evelyn's recorded message. The video opened with her standing at an airport terminal in daylight, dressed in a simple navy suit, her voice calm and steady. Every seat holds a story. Every passenger carries a life. A little kindness at 30,000 feet can bring humanity closer to the ground. Let's choose respect. It costs nothing, yet it changes everything. The campaign went viral, not for shock, but for sincerity. Airlines around the world began adopting similar initiatives. Flight attendants shared the message proudly, and travelers began using the hashtag #FlyWithRespect on social media to share their own positive encounters. As for Karen, she started volunteering at a local community center that helped teach anger management and empathy workshops. She spoke softly when she introduced herself, never hiding her story. I was once that person who thought the world owed me something, she would say. Now I know peace isn't demanded, it's practiced. Months later, fate brought both women together again, not in the confined aisle of an airplane, but at an aviation safety conference in Denver. Evelyn was the keynote speaker. Karen had been invited by one of the organizers who had followed her redemption story online. When Evelyn spotted her in the crowd afterward, she walked over, smiling warmly. Miss Miles, she greeted. Karen stood, nervous but grateful. Mrs. Moore, she said softly, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm glad you came, Evelyn replied, offering her hand. Karen shook it gently, and in that handshake, the air felt lighter, as if the tension from that fateful flight had finally dispersed into forgiveness. Evelyn leaned in slightly. You've come far, she said. Karen nodded, her eyes glassy. Thanks to your grace, I found mine. They both smiled. Around them, the conference buzzed with optimism and progress, a reflection of how tragedy, when handled with compassion, could lead to transformation. As the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline, painting the airport runways gold, Evelyn glanced out one last time at the departing planes. The world was still noisy, still flawed, still impatient, but moments like this reminded her why she had dedicated her life to it. Every flight carried a chance for something new, not just destinations, but lessons, and sometimes, those lessons arrived right on schedule.